Welcome to the WSO2 API demo sessions. In today's session, we'll cover the benefit of using external identity provider to exchange user claims and map external to internal roles. When you start with the API development, one of the first tasks will be to identify the user that can create API, publish it, approve different parts in the API lifecycle, etc. Creating test users for POC or for demo purpose is acceptable, but in real life, the organization has a different business units, many groups, hundreds of users, and more than one user store. Challenges that someone can face is that user in some organization can be in more than one user store. It could be on the cloud or in the local. The groups that user belongs to are not uniform. User can have different roles in every user store. WSO2 has possibility to connect with any LDAP, Active Directory or JDBC database directly or use any external identity provider. In today's session, we will cover the usage of Azure as external identity provider. First, in Azure, we need to register new application in Active Directory. Let's name it API and name. Through this application, we will get info about users' accounts. You have the option to choose which account will be accessible through this newly created application. Here, we will define the redirect URL where account information will be passed after successful login. After successful creation, mark the application or client ID. Next, in certificates and secrets section, we need to create the client secrets. During creation, we can choose expiration time. When the client secret is created, mark it down. After that, we need to specify what information application have access to by defining permissions. Click on the application permissions section and click on add permission and choose Microsoft Graph. Next, click on the delegate permission and select email, OpenID and profile section. A good practice is to create a separate group so you can assign users that need access to APIM development portal or publisher. Select security group and name it API subscribers. Add a description, choose owner, it's optional, and you can select the users that will belong to this group. Next, we need to configure our Azure application to populate the group's claim in the ID token. Go to Azure Application section and click on the token configuration. They need information about the group that user belong to be included in the token. Click on the Add Group Claims, tick the security group, then expand the ID section and choose the group ID and enable emit groups as a role claims. Before we go to WSO2 setting, mark the application endpoints. Go to Overview page of the Azure application and click the Endpoints button. This will pop up upside window with all the necessary endpoints of our application. Let's log in into Carbon Console and Identity Provider section. Click on the Add menu item. New identity provider registration will show where we can add a name it like Azure AD demo, and define display name. To certify endpoint, we will provide JWKey endpoint URL found in the OpenID Connect metadata document link. We will fill out the OAuth2 connection configuration section. Select checkbox to enable this provider and leave it to be default. Provide the client ID and the client secret information and fill out authorization point and token point from the metadata information. Define the callback URL. Provide user info endpoint on additional query parameters. Add values for OpenID profile and email. Be careful to provide it in the proper URL and coding style. For just-in-time provisioning, we will choose to provision to primary user store and also choose the option for a silent provisioning. We will define which claims we need from the identity provider in the claim configuration section. For that purpose, We will add two custom claim mappings. Azure preferred user name will be mapped to local display name, while Azure roles claim will be mapped to the local WSO2 role claim. For the user ID claim, we will choose preferred user name, and for a role, we will choose roles claim. We are getting group ID as a role, and we need to convert to the local roles. In roles configuration, we will map API subscribers group GUID to internal subscriber role and API developers group GUID to internal creator roles. Once when we have external identity provider registered, we need it to include in the login process for publisher and dev portal. Let's go to the service provider section and edit dev portal by clicking on edit button. First, let's define mapping for claims that we are receiving. In claim configuration, in select claim mapping dialect, select custom claim and map preferred username with WSO2 display name, and in the same way for a role claim, map it for a WSO2 role claim. For subject, choose preferred username, and for role, choose role claim. Next, in the section Local and Outbound Authentication Configuration, choose Advanced Configuration. Our goal is to give user opportunity to choose the way how will be identified. So we will add two steps or options. First option will be basic identification, and second will be to use external identity provider, and in our case it's Azure AD demo provider. In the same way, we will populate the section for a published service provider as well. Before we can test this, we need to change global configuration. In deployment toml configuration file, we need to add enable email domain configuration item to allow the user to use their emails as a username. In same file, under user store section, we need to change default username regex definition. By default, it's allow only 30 characters, and email can be much longer. Before we log with the external provider, observe that right now in the local user store we have registered only local users. Now when we try to log in publisher, we're going to get the login screen on which we right now have an option to choose external identity provider. After successful login, we will be redirected back to the publisher portal. In the Carbon console, we can now see the new user, and if we check its role, we will see that user have correct role based on the group that he belongs to in the Azure environment. User that I choose belong to both Azure groups, API developers and API subscribers, and it was provisioned in the WSO2 primary user store. Roles internal creator and internal subscriber has been given to him. In a summary, using WSO2 API management, there is no need to any user migration while integrated with the new user store. API management can connect directly, or what we have shown today, can use any external provider to allow access to user with correct permission. With this approach, user can choose any connection identity provider to validate their identity, like Facebook, Twitter, Google, Office 365, LinkedIn account, etc. There is no vendor or technology lockdown by using WSO2 open source solution. Thank you for your patience and see you next time.